Michael Costa was in the firing line, and from his own branch members no less. In Cessnock today, the New South Wales Treasurer and Minister for the Hunter was facing outrage over the government's electricity privatisation plan. During the branch meeting, he made big promises to people employed in the electricity industry.
We guarantee all of those workers they can stay in their jobs.
And denied electricity prices would rise as a result of the sale. But the minister's main message was this:
all of our poles and wires and the generators will remain owned by the taxpayers in New South Wales. We're certainly getting out of what they call the retail function, but that's has no assets in it other than the customer lists.
And if it was tough going inside, outside was a nightmare. Dozens of protesters forced him to walk through a gauntlet of taunts.
He's not even really willing to listen. He's just rude and obnoxious.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Surf carnivals just aren't the real deal without the March past. Hunter Branch legend Cliff Marsh with the honours out in front. It's a position Cronulla's Naomi Flood is used to. Right from the start, she dominated the Iron Woman decider. Candice Falzon adds more than just glamour to the beach these days, but she could only race for second as Flood went about adding to her already impressive personal medal tally at these championships. Blitzing the field, she also stretched her hold on this race for yet another year.
A little bit of pressure this year, I think, going for 4 in a row, but no, I'm stoked. It was a big relief.
What a start line in the men's Ironman. At 41, Terrigal's Paul Lemon qualified against most half his age. It was title number 6 that was the only figure on Nathan Smith's mind. His last full-on tilt at a race he's made his own for much of the last decade, Smith was chased the entire way by teammate Chris Allen. Bulleyes Drew Cancross joined the fray late in the piece, but Smith was carving his name into the record books with each step towards an emotional finish.
Bloody awesome, to be honest. For sure that's going to be my last Ironman at State.
Redhead's Peter Scott was one of the local stars to shine on finals day with another ski title to his name. He hopes to defend his national crown at Perth in a matter of weeks.
Police hope the state government's offer of a $100,000 reward for information about Gordon French's killer will shed new light on the 14-month-old murder case.
I guess there's nothing like the lure of money for people who have got information.
The 36-year-old victim was found outside his Bar Beach apartment block in January last year, suffering from a single stab wound in the chest. Police have now released a description of the man believed responsible for his death.
A male, late teens to early 20s, fair complexion, blonde surfy type hair, thin build, wearing a pair of light coloured board shorts.
They've also released descriptions of his two accomplices. The first is aged in his early 20s with dark hair and solidly built. The second is aged in his mid-20s with an olive complexion and medium build.
Police would particularly like to speak to those two males because they believe that it will take the matter a lot further than it is right now.
The three young men were seen outside Mr French's apartment just before his murder. An identical reward was offered last October for information leading to the conviction of Frank Newbury's killer. So far, no one has collected the money.
That case is still ongoing. There are a number of other leads that we're still following with that.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Newcastle has the state's highest number of offenders in custody per capita, which is why the Lower Hunter was chosen as the location to trial a state government-supported community chaplaincy program.
Hopefully we might be able to assist offenders to get on with their lives and make some major changes and be more contributing in a positive way back to the community of Newcastle.
Each time somebody gets out of jail, they come out a little less socially adapted than they went in, a little less employable, a little less functional, less able to relate to others.
The initiative will piggyback similar reintegration programs, but for the first time the support will come from a community-based chaplain. Reverend Kim Miller will coordinate the program from a soon-to-be-established drop-in centre and is looking for volunteers from the community to help.
The TV set you save might be your own. The more we're positive in the lives of men coming out of jail, the less likely that our community will suffer from their reoffending.
If the 3-year trial is a success, the program will be rolled out to other areas in the state. Lauren Bladwell, NBN News.
It's shaping as the hard luck story of the cricket season, with Mark Cameron destined to be left watching the Pura Cup final despite spearheading the Blues into the decider.
I think I'll prepare to play, and if I'm named 12th or 13th, and such is life.
A philosophical outlook from a man whose form has been hard to ignore. 27 wickets in 4 matches, 4 of them coming in yesterday's rout of South Australia. But he knows better than most that names like Lee, Bracken and Clark are automatic selections when available.
All I was doing was, I suppose, holding the position for them. So really looking forward to, I suppose, seeing who's in 11 myself. If I'm in it, then that's great, and if I'm not, then I'll do whatever role is needed.
While missing the final would obviously hurt, the 27-year-old has thrust his name forward as a long-term prospect for Australian tours to the West Indies and England.
I suppose it's one of my motivations is I obviously want to play for Australia, but look, I've been a first-class cricketer for about 20 seconds, so like I understand I've got to, I suppose, continue to prove myself, and every time I go out there, just do as good as I can.
The final against Victoria starts at the SCG on Saturday. Jim Callanan, NBN News. Training with the Knights today, Luke Walsh could be suited up in Catalan's colours by the weekend. An offer has come from the French club to fly him over on a loan deal to cover for their injured halfback Casey Maguire. At present, it's only for 2 months, after which he would return to play for the Knights. Meanwhile, the team to play the opening NRL match against the Raiders this Saturday night in Newcastle has just been released, with Chris Bailey winning first rights to partner Jared Mullen in the halves. The lock come 5/8 knows the partnership will be a work in progress over the early rounds, where he hopes to secure the spot for good.
You don't build combinations overnight. Before that, I mean, they had a nucleus of the squad were together for a long time, so that's going to take a little bit to build, I think.
With the likes of forwards Ben Cross and Mitchell Sargent both unavailable and recruit Danny Wicks with little game time under his belt, Jesse Royal and Dan Toller have won starting spots in the front row.
3 big names and 3 powerful players right there, so I just got to be on my game and do my best.
It's due reward for the 25-year-old who has ridden the roller coaster ride with injury since debuting in 2005.
I just want to play first grade all year. If I'm off the bench or I'm starting, it doesn't bother me, but I like to cement that starting spot.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
I wanted to play with my brother wanted me to play with him. My brother's very comfortable at Newcastle at the moment, but I'm sure in the future we'll play together, maybe with the Socceroos too.
Few complaints and good results. All in all, it was a good couple of weeks for the Swansea Belmont Club, which is 1 year into a 3-year hosting deal of the State Surf Life Saving Championships.
5 years that I've refereed, this has probably been one of the better ones. It's been absolutely outstanding.
It's a fair rap and one that has the club on the radar as a backup to Coffs Harbour should the North Coast branch fail to have promised infrastructure built in time when the Australian Championships are due there in 2010. If that comes off, the economic boost for the Lake Macquarie region would be on par with the last 2 weeks, which has been huge for the area.
Roughly, you're looking around about $150 per head per night, and we're bringing in here something like 8,000 competitors plus supporters and coaches and so forth. So it's a substantial number of people.
Swansea Belmont's Nikki Chapman didn't think she'd be one of them making the carnival on a home beach a month ago due to problems with her feet. Ironically, they helped her stride to a powerful finish yesterday and race away with the Under-19 Ironwoman Championship in an effort that helped the home club place 3rd overall.
It was the day in court police, licensees and resident groups have been waiting for, with the Liquor Administration Board expected to decide whether or not to approve a police request for a 1 a.m. curfew and 3 a.m. close. But the anticipation came to nothing, with the board's Dave Armati declining to make a ruling after hearing hours of evidence. He said the issues in this matter are complex. There are many. I have formed a view as to what decision I make and will notify the complainants in writing.
It's interesting that the chairman has decided to reserve the decision and reduce it to writing, and we'll now, I guess, wait with bated breath to see what comes from that.
During the hearing, resident groups demanded even earlier closures to be forced on 15 Newcastle pubs and clubs, claiming the city was suffering from a man-made plague of binge drinking, with young people already intoxicated before they arrive in the city.
Well, we believe there's an overwhelming evidence to support our application for a 12 midnight closure and other comprehensive measures to address the problem.
Licensees maintain that a curfew and restricted hours of trade won't solve anything. Rather, they put forward the need for a city-wide plan as well as individual plans of management.
We've put forward solutions, and I think they're proactive solutions. We haven't pointed our finger at anyone.
And I'm hoping that Mr. Ahmadi, the magistrate, will recognise that and will engage in a process that's inclusive to bring all parties together.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
St Joseph's High School is the setting for what's expected to be the biggest single one-day mass vaccination ever held in the region. Dubbed Ring of Rosies, the exercise scenario is testing how efficiently local health authorities and supporting agencies like St John Ambulance can vaccinate the public in the event of a flu pandemic. In reality, it's not a case of if, but when.
The whole of Australia and all of its governments and territories are taking the World Health Organisation's guidance to prepare for a pandemic very seriously.
Kevin Bell was eager to get the existing flu shot after having had a frightening experience with the illness.
And I had 18 days on life support in John Hunter with this flu. I was in John Hunter all of April, and then most of May back in Scone recovering, and I'm still just getting over it.
It's one example of the reason why Hunter New England Health wants people prepared for winter.
That people, particularly those that are vulnerable, those that are elderly or those with pre-existing health conditions, make sure they get themselves vaccinated against influenza as well.
The mass vaccination for residents and those who work in Aberdeen continues until 8 p.m. Gary Blair, NBN News.
Since 2 outdated vessels were taken out of service last year, Lake Macquarie Coastal Patrol has been covering the entire lake, plus the coastline from Red Head to Norah Head, with just 1 vessel. It's also been picking up the slack from the Water Police, with 4 of its 10 boats undergoing repair. The patrol is now busy fundraising for a second vessel, which can access the shallow areas of the lake.
Well, if we do get 2 calls at the same time, a second vessel would be very handy, especially in the busy time of year.
But with their income generated from raffles and sausage sizzles and an operating cost of $5,000 a month, the members are still $120,000 shy of their target.
It's very hard to get sufficient funds to really operate the base, and when we need something extra for equipment, it becomes even harder to get the money together.
The Coastal Patrol is holding an open day this Saturday to raise money for the new boat and awareness of the patrol's important role in the community. Lauren Bladwell, NBN News. During Earth Hour 2007, more than 2,000 businesses achieved a 10% reduction in energy, and the savings are going to be even bigger this year, with more organisations including Port Stephens Council taking part. It will switch the lights off at 10 of its biggest facilities and monitor the savings online. The information will be used to develop an ongoing energy conservation program.
From that, we'll be able to set targets for the future, which we should be able to maintain every weekend when those facilities aren't operational.
Meanwhile, Tomaree High School is moving ahead in the Climate Cam for Schools program aimed at combating climate change, the latest initiative, a project to propagate native seeds.
And that enterprise is working for a mine regeneration company. We're propagating plants and selling them back to the mine as a regeneration, but also a carbon capture initiative.
Lauren Bladwell, NBN News.
2007 couldn't have been much better for Kurt Gidley, earning both state and Australian representation. It also made him hot property on the player market, but the Knights have held off the courting clubs, signing him to a 3-year contract with the option of a 4th.
I haven't wiped the smile off my face, since I sort of made the decision last night.
A hometown boy, it was always going to be hard to leave, but the 25-year-old sought advice from close friends and family, in particular his brother Matthew.
I think Matt, being a one-club man was something that also had a big influence on it.
While he hopes there isn't a need to fill the role on a regular basis for some time yet, club captaincy is a long-term goal.
Definitely the guys who I've played with that have been captains, Bedsy, Joey, those sort of guys, Bill Peden, have been real leaders, and I think they're definitely guys that I looked up to, and it's something I'd love to have a crack at, yeah.
When someone of Kurt's quality re-signs with his club, I think it's sending a message. Got some confidence about the place.
Jim Callanan, NBN News. It's bound to be one of the ongoing stories of the season, and it was hard to avoid more speculation today. The club admitting the playing future of Danny Badiris beyond this year lay squarely in his hands.
We will work with him either way. If he wants to stay, we will then work with the Surrey cap and stay. If his decision is to go and finish in England, we wouldn't stand in his road either.
The team to start the season against Canberra on Saturday night is also to be confirmed. Using a squad of 20, coach Brian Smith will wait until closer to game days this season before confirming his final 17, a tactic he'll employ throughout the season. Either way, it leaves a certain level of intrigue over some positions, particularly the halves.
We'll be utilising all of the talents of those guys. Walsh is not even in the squad this week, but he will be at some stages, and we're thinking we'll use all 4 of them.
One thing is for sure, Luke Walsh won't be heading to France anytime soon, the NRL ending any chance he had of playing on an injury loan in the English Super League for Catalans, declaring that registered players can't hold dual contracts. Not the normal sort of harbour-side attire, but Brendan Clark doesn't mind turning heads. That's the whole point, and come late May he'll be back with some of the best bull riders in the world, boots, buckles and all.
Well, this will be the biggest event in this town that anyone's ever seen, the biggest bull riding event.
This is what he's talking about, the PBR. A multi-million-dollar American professional bull riding circuit that showcases all the highs and lows the sport has to offer. Rarely seen on foreign shores, the PBR is honouring Brandon with an invitational event at the Newcastle Entertainment Centre.
To have my event, something I've worked so hard for so long, with my name on it in Newcastle, it's awesome.
And it's not like the former world number 8 won't be out to upstage the lot of them either. Enjoying one of his best starts to a PBR season, Clark hopes the chance to shine on home soil brings out the best in him yet.
After a 3.5-week hearing in Newcastle District Court, former Swansea MP Milton Okopoulos faced the media for one of the few remaining times before the conclusion of his trial. 39 witnesses have taken the stand. Today, Judge Coonahan was summing up the case. He called on the 11 jurors to assess the evidence and draw conclusions from it and treat each count separately, like 31 trials being held at the same time. He also asked jurors to bear in mind there were no immediate complaints made, so the complainant's reliability is compromised as memories fade. And he asked the jury to consider that evidence may be unreliable due to use of drugs over the period of time. Judge Coonahan then summarised each witness' account, including the 3 alleged victims. He said one witness who allegedly had a long-running sexual relationship with Okopoulos and received cannabis from him has told the court that the sexual activity started before he turned 18. It's alleged that on one occasion Okopoulos rubbed the boy's leg and thigh, but the alleged victim pushed him away. Reading from notes, the judge said the accused then allegedly started rubbing his own penis and then unzipped the boy's pants and started touching his penis, allegedly committing an act of indecency. On another occasion inside the MP's office, he said the accused allegedly removed the boy's clothes and performed homosexual intercourse. The judge summarised another alleged victim's account. This witness said that Mr Okopoulos had supplied him with marijuana and heroin. The victim, who was allegedly under 18 at the time, also claims he had non-consensual homosexual intercourse with Milton Okopoulos. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
The development will see 5 10-storey apartment and retail blocks built on this stretch of land. While council has voted to support the project, it wants the developer to provide public art in the area or enhance Argyle House before it grants approval. Meanwhile, work on the former Newcastle Post Office should start in July. The job to convert the building into a boutique bar is expected to take about a year, but there's still no time frame as to if and when redevelopment work at Nobby's will begin. After 6 years, developer Neil Slater is still waiting project approval. It remains in the hands of Federal Environment Minister Peter Garrett. Today, Sharon Grierson said she was continuing discussions with the minister and was very hopeful that within the next 2 weeks there would be some way forward. Mr Slater just wants a decision made.
If we get a decision, we can at least work out what we're doing with our lives rather than have your life on hold for 6 years. It's a very expensive project, certainly for a small business to take on the renovation of Nobby's.
Madeline Bond, NBN News. For once, it wasn't an NBN News crew asking people their opinions on the street. Today, it was an English BBC film crew targeting locals.
We've got the London Olympics coming in 2012 and we're quite a way up north in Newcastle, England, so we're trying to work out, will we get anything from the Games? And what better place to come than Newcastle, New South Wales and see what you got out of the Games back in 2000.
Although trying to find it out was proving difficult, with the official line that Newcastle got jobs, investment and a swag of tourists vastly different from the public's view.
On the street, people either can't remember the Games, other than it was great, but did he do anything for Newcastle? I can't get much out of the people here, I have to say.
At the end of the day, the team approached Hunter Tourism for help and advice on how to get people to travel from London 3 hours north to Newcastle.
I guess my advice was to be proactive, have a very well thought through strategy for targeting those consumers.
The crew finishes filming the documentary in Sydney tomorrow. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Norm and his wife Miriam were renewing their membership at Newcastle Workers Club when the building collapsed during the 1989 earthquake. What happened next is a tale of true courage. Miriam died, but Norm, despite being pinned under concrete and suffering injuries so severe he went into cardiac arrest, helped free others and buoyed the spirits of those around him. Today, the life of this hero was celebrated. Mr Duffy's son Michael and his grandsons the pallbearers for his funeral. Alan Playford, an ambulance paramedic who worked in the area of Newcastle Workers where Mr Duffy was trapped, was among those who paid their respects.
Rarely do you meet a person who knows that he's going to die and yet is so stoic to the end, with his concern and level of care for those who were trapped with him. So he was an inspiration, to say the least.
Meanwhile, the great-grandson of the namesake for the suburb of Merewether has died at the age of 85. Edward John Merewether, known by his middle name, left his own legacy, establishing several educational scholarships. Lauren Bladwell, NBN News. Balance is something most of us take for granted, but nobody knows how we maintain it.
What we'd like to do is figure out why we can stand up and why we don't fall over. And the reason it's a problem is that as we get older, just like we lose our hearing, we also lose our balance.
Dr. Alan Brichter has spent the last 25 years researching how balance signals are generated in the inner ear and transmitted to the brain, and the $1 million fellowship will see him continue that work full-time. Once he understands the nuts and bolts of the system, he hopes to develop a treatment for those with balance disorders like dizziness.
The obvious treatment would be something like a balance aid that we have similar to hearing aids. Now that's a long way off, and I don't want to raise anybody's hopes.
Dizziness is more common than many people think, with almost half of the population seeking medical advice for it at some stage. It's more prevalent than angina and hypertension.
Unlike people who've got perhaps blindness or hearing impairments, because they can sort of make their way in the world, whereas when people have balance problems, they don't leave the house, and it spoils everything they do.
Lauren Bladwell, NBN News.
During his last Olympic campaigns in 1996 and 2000, Matt Gray wasn't married, had no children or a job. But in the 8 years between games, that's since changed. The Nelson Bay Water Police officer now has a family, a career, everything but an Olympic medal.
Years ago, I was just full-time archery. So now, whatever result happens, I've still got a great job to go back to.
When he's not patrolling Port Stephens or at home, the 34-year-old is here, a back lane on private property with a target at the end. As a training venue, it's not first class, but has its advantages.
I think I can train myself. I've learned how to train properly, being at the Institute for a few years. There's no big secret on what to do, it's just hard work and a lot of hours.
Gray is one of 5 in the Australian archery team and the only Olympian in a squad of debutants.
We've got 3 World Cups that we'll go to before the Olympics, and all the countries going to the Olympic Games will compete in those. Our best chance will be in the teams event. We're highly ranked in the teams.
Adam McIlroy, NBN News. For the clients of Tomaree links to the community, Shoal Bay is their backyard. The people who live here have an intellectual disability, and fishing has been missing from their recreational menu until now.
A little fish is a big thing to them.
The program's been funded by the Recreational Fishing Trust, which collects licence fees from everyday anglers.
And I'm sure there wouldn't be a recreational fisherman in this state who would object to how the money has been spent here today.
Not only getting them out into the fresh air, but it's also getting them to socialise as well with their peers, which is a great thing.
Fishing, carers say, also gives them a focus, something they can do for a lifetime, providing plenty of fishy tales.
Tell us, how big was the fish that you caught?
That one.
It must have been the one that got away. Adam McKilrick, NBN News. The 22-metre Nemesis is the pride of Nelson Bay's Water Police fleet, a valued community service in the coastline it patrols between Stockton and Port Macquarie and 200 nautical miles to sea.
We know that we've got the Nemesis to look after us, but if we're going to lose it, there's going to be an uproar in this community, I'm sure.
NBN News understands a plan is being considered to sell the Port Stephens vessel to help pay for the maintenance of a new so-called superboat due to be operational next month.
The new Nemesis will be the biggest dedicated police boat in the Southern Hemisphere.
It will also be based in Sydney, leaving Port Stephens and Newcastle with just the one boat. In this case, the 16-metre Intrepid currently berthed at Carrington, but likely to be shifted to Nelson Bay if the plan is followed through.
It seems damn ridiculous to even contemplate it, and one wonders which bureaucrat in Sydney's lost his marbles over this one.
Keep the Nemesis. We desperately need this boat to stay here.
Both the members for Port Stephens and Newcastle knew nothing of the plan but are seeking assurances from the Police Minister that services provided to the boating community will not be compromised. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
Moving out of the old and into the new. After 9 months of waiting, the Hunters Rescue helicopter personnel are finally leaving the flood-ravaged section of their operations building and starting work in a new control room.
We've been still very busy and we haven't missed a beat, so it's just a matter of some short-term pain, long-term gain.
The low-lying damaged building will be knocked down in just over a week and a new state-of-the-art $1.5 million building put in its place.
The new two-storey building will bring us all in the one section, if you like. At the moment, administration segregated from the operations.
Around $900,000 of the funding has come from community donations and through tradesmen offering their services at reduced prices.
Without the support of the builders and the business community behind us once again, we wouldn't be able to build the world-class facility that we're about to build.
The new building should be in use by October. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Good health is important to all of us, and in labs across Newcastle, researchers are looking for solutions to life's many medical mysteries.
Conception, so how to create a healthy pregnancy, right through to ageing well and ageing productively.
10 years ago, the University of Newcastle and Hunter Health partnered to create HMRI. Back then, it embraced about 100 researchers. Now there are nearly 600 in the fold. The institute has attracted $22 million in research funding, growing steadily in both size and stature.
10 years to go from nothing to be the third largest in the state is quite an achievement.
The highlights of those formative years are featured in a commemorative booklet. Among them, the breakthrough work of local asthma researchers like Dr. Jodie Simpson.
We've identified a new kind of asthma, and just more recently we've looked at a new treatment for this kind of asthma.
It all began with a community grant of $20,000. The project has since attracted $400,000 in government funding.
It's really, I guess for me, allowed me to do things that were beyond my wildest dreams.
The next step for HMRI, a standalone building touted for 2012. Just a few months ago, the Royal Newcastle stood 9 stories tall, commanding some of the best views over the city and beaches. Now the site is undergoing a dramatic transformation, the building demolished floor by floor.
Demolition is progressing very well. It's currently to schedule. We'd suggest we're probably 50% of the way through the demolition process, and we'll be looking to have it completed by the end of April.
The public exhibition period for Stage 1 closed last Tuesday, and the Department of Planning only received 3 submissions from government agencies about the redevelopment, none from members of the public, despite the size of the residential and commercial project. Meanwhile, scaffolding is beginning to come down around the former Latex house in Hunter Street, revealing what will be the Grand Mercure Hotel. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Even before a ball's been kicked this season, farewells are in the making.
It's been one of the toughest decisions, obviously, to leave the club that I love, and I've been brought up playing and played all my whole career here. So,
Danny Baderas came to Newcastle from Taree 13 years ago, and when this season finishes, he'll move his young family to Northern England to play with Super League side Leeds.
It's just the right thing and the right time for me to move on and further my ambitions.
We're always looking for world-class players, and not only great players, but great people as well.
The superlatives flowed from his peers, and rightly so. Considered a gentleman of the game, no one's begrudging him a chance to play overseas, even if it means cutting his Knights contract a year short.
I think there hasn't been a better ambassador for Newcastle Knights or rugby league in general. And
stopping short of putting on the jumper, these are the colours the 205-game veteran will wear next year. But at the moment, Newcastle remains his first priority. Representative jumpers are still in the mix as well.
This year's a year of last for me. It's, I'm going to approach every game like that, and I'd love to be involved in another Origin series, but that's all up to me. I guess I've got to be playing as well as I can. And
Badiris told his teammates this morning, and while they expected it, they also acknowledge replacing him is near enough to impossible.
We should all savour every moment we have with him this year.
Behind Andrew Johns, arguably, I think, the best player to play the game in the last 10 years.
Adam McIlrick, NBN News. Michael Diamond says life on the water is just as beneficial to his Olympics campaign as target practice. The skeet shooter's new boat is called Last Time. Apart from a name, we're told it means nothing.
There is no use-by date in our sport.
At 34, he'll attempt to join Dawn Fraser in the record books to become the only athlete to win 3 gold medals over 3 Olympic Games.
It's very flattering. I think that, in the same breath, I'm going into the Olympics in Beijing not thinking about, being up there with Dawn Fraser.
But there is one tag Diamond is comfortable with, and that's as flag bearer for the Aussie team. Nothing's been made official, but he remains very much the front runner.
The opening ceremony, the closing ceremony, the team morale, and hopefully everything in between that, coincides together to be able to give me my 3rd Olympic gold medal.
Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
During the 4-week trial, a number of family and friends supported Orkopolis. Today he entered the court alone. The 11-member jury took just over a day to convict the former frontbencher of supplying drugs to 3 minors and grooming them for sex over an 11-year period. He was cleared of 2 charges relating to child sex and cannabis supply. The 50-year-old had maintained his innocence since his arrest in late 2006, and while he'd admitted some of the drugs charges, Orkopolis told the court during the trial he was fighting for his life. But today he stood in the dock, head bowed as the verdicts were read out, frowning and occasionally shaking his head. Judge Ralph Coulihan thanked the jury, adding it's never easy to judge fellow citizens. While the Defence Counsel had nothing to say, the police investigators were satisfied with the result. Former Newcastle Labor MP Bryce Gaudry defended his actions, saying he accepted the word of his long-term friend when told of the allegations several years ago, and that today is a sad day for all concerned.
My only regrets are my regrets for the suffering that people have gone through, the complainants, their families, the families of Milton Orkopolis.
Orkopolis was refused bail to appear before a sentencing hearing next Thursday. The father of 3 is facing up to 14 years in prison. Penny Evans, NBN News. Hunter Water plans to lodge the environmental assessment of the site with the state government by mid-year. It's ecstatic with the test drilling results for the proposed dam site near Dungog so far.
Having great hard rock under the dam is important because there's little cracking and therefore there's little leakage in the dam, and there'll be less cost to build the dam on that site. So that's important in terms of community cost and making sure that we've got a safe dam for the future.
It now owns 80% of the land to be inundated with water, with negotiations over 10 properties continuing.
We're very hopeful we will work through those in an agreeable basis, and so before we start construction early next year, we'll have resolved all those issues.
From Dungog Council's point of view, things couldn't be running smoother.
We have a great relationship with Hunter Water and with the Telegra Dam Community Reference Group, and at this point in time I'd have to say that I'm delighted where we're at with proceedings.
Although Mayor Glenn Wall admits there's still some angst about the proposal amongst local residents, Council is urging the wider community to accept the dam will be built and focus on making the most of the situation. Penny Evans, NBN News.
It's a sight seen too often and the source of a long-running emotional debate about how we prepare young drivers for the reality of being on our roads.
Youth drivers represent 15% of licence holders, but over 30% of crash victims. That statistic is just way too high, and we need to reduce that.
The NRMA driving school is the 41st to be opened across the state and will take driver knowledge beyond what they have learned for the driving test. According to crash statistics released by the Newcastle Council, in the past 5 years, 7 young people were killed on the city's roads, while over 1,000 were injured in crashes. And the council says behind those figures, there are other costs.
There's huge costs to the community as well through insurance, through all of the things that go with that in terms of the cost of running the rescue services, the policing services.
The lessons are available for new drivers, with refresher courses for more experienced motorists also available. Lucy Wilson, NBN News.
If there wasn't enough on his plate already, Brian Smith was served up to a band of red and blue faithful today for lunch, and most wanted to know largely the same thing: who will run out in the season opener tomorrow night. As speculation grew that Scott Giroux was in the team over Chris Bailey, the coach played it straight on game eve. Tomorrow night's match will feature several debutants for Newcastle, many of them former Dragons who now want to cut it as Knights. Denny Wicks is one of those, and after a pre-season which included a road accident and little game time, he knows there's only one chance to make a good first impression.
They've got a big forward pack, and we also pride ourselves on what our forward pack's going to be like this year, so it's going to be a good tester for us.
The Raiders fly into Newcastle tomorrow morning, buoyed by the news key playmaker Todd Carney has agreed to a long-term deal at the club, which could see him remain in Raiders colours until the end of 2012. Jim Callanan, NBN News. Olympic Games only roll around every 4 years, but these athletes make it a daily habit. They have to if Paralympic medals await. It's what drives track wheelchair athlete Christy Dawes, that and husband Andrew, who just happens to be her coach, in a unique partnership they hope will yield her first podium finish at a Games.
We've recently had our Australian series, and we had 5 of the top girls from overseas come, and during the course of the series I managed to knock off 4 of the top 5, so I think my chances are better than ever.
In the best form of her career, the 28-year-old isn't saying this will be her last Paralympics, but is preparing that way just in case. 2007 is going to take some beating for training partner Kurt Fernley, who won almost everything there was to win. Claiming 10 of 11 marathons worldwide, he set 6 course records and was nominated in the famed Laureus World Sports Awards. Domination comes to mind, but his focus is on what's ahead.
You could win a dozen marathons in 2007, but 2008 would be a bigger year if I could just come home with one of those gold medals at the Games.
That's why he's returned to Newcastle to prepare much like he did before Athens, determined to defend his Paralympic status. Before then, some unfinished business awaits in London. That city's marathon was the only race he didn't win in 07, and it was by less than a metre.
Yeah, I feel better than what I've ever felt before, so I know that I'm going in there confident. I'm going in there in the best form that I've ever been.
Second, they're out by 3 lengths over discarding third. It's in reverse, passed by just a miss, and on the outside was Passion Dash. It's 60 Watt in front, but getting up along the inside, worth the effort. 60 Watt won't go straight. It's a half length in front, but starts to race clear. And first up, Blake Spriggs, well done. 60 Watt has beaten second, worth the effort. Third on the inside was just a miss, followed fourth by Libby's Rainbow and Tatum. Behind those next was towards the rear of the field, Passion Dash together with